Hi everyone, I'm Tina Reynolds and I'm here with Stacey Shelnut-Hendrick. And what we're doing is Black stories that white people need to hear. And this is to create an awareness. I'm here and I brought big ears. All I want to do is listen and ask questions of Stacey and to understand where it is that you've spent your life coming from, and the people before you and the people before them. So Stacey, the question that I have is, like, we've been asking people to talk about the weightiness of being Black in America. When you walk outside and you're in a group, what is the weightiness that when you're inside and you're with your people, it's different. When you walk outside, what does that feel like? Or if you have a story of how you have experienced racism in your life, and it is up to you. I just want to hear your story.
Well, thank you for wanting to hear my story. I think I love that you're trying to listen and hear different stories and different perspectives. I think one story that resonated with me, I think when you asked, and I think it came to me pretty immediately, was a time when first of all, I should back up. I grew up in New York City. So New York is very much a melting pot of the utmost kind. And so I grew up in Washington Heights. I grew up in a building that had a huge population of people from the Dominican Republic. It also had Hasidic Jews. It had like a lot of different types of people. And so the story I have sort of gets framed by that backdrop a little bit, people living next door from each other in very close proximities. And so you constantly have a sense of other, in a really close proximity. So one day I was in New York, and this is when I must have been, I think, in my early 20s. I was driving with my mom. We had purchased together this cute little red Saab. And so we would, you don't need a car in New York, but for some reason, we like to run to New Jersey. You have to sort of know New York to know how close everything is, not like California. So we would take this little red Saab to New Jersey, Westchester, and other places, zipping here and there. And it was an old little clunker, but we loved it. One day we were driving through Harlem to visit my cousin. And we were pulled over by two policemen. And it was surprising because, we were laughing. And if you knew my mom, she's very lighthearted, and we were enjoying mother and daughter time together. And we were laughing, listening to music. We hear sirens around us, not quite clear as to why. I was driving at the time. And so I pulled over, and two policemen approached our car, one on her side and one on my side, both with hands on their guns. And as they closely approached the car, guns drawn. And when they saw we were two females, they immediately put their guns back into their holsters and said, "Sorry, we got a report that there were two Black men that stole something or robbed the bank." I have no idea. But when they saw we were women, they backed off. And so my mother immediately got upset because in her head, she's older, she's lived through a certain time. She immediately got upset when she heard that they were just pulling over two Black people in red cars. You know what I mean? Like, imagine that. If two white people had stolen something, they're not going to pull over every two white people they see in a car. You know what I mean? But they feel comfortable to pull over every two Black people they see in a car. So when she heard that they had made this mistake, she immediately went to say something in my mother's tone of voice, which you have to know my mom would have been very clear about her perspective on the situation. And he then put his hand back on his gun and came back toward her and said, "Excuse me," like she didn't have a right to be upset. And I had to shut my mother up. And I remember thinking like I don't shut my mother up. Like, that's something that I should never be in a situation where I have to do, but I had to do that in fearing for our lives. Like, Mom, don't express your anger. Don't express that this is not fair. Don't express that this has happened to you many times. Don't express, like, it's years of stuff that I'm asking her to, shove down just in order for us to survive this situation. And I kept thinking about that as one of those moments where everything was sort of just not right, and not being able to say it wasn't right. And that always has stuck with me, and always has, I want to say, colored my moments in which I've had to interact with the police.
The thing that you said about shushing your mother and having to shove down all of the past. I mean, that's the thing right there. It's like she's bringing her whole self to that moment. And is it because your experiences were different and you were more fearful of the police than she was, and she was just being her activist self?
Yeah, we always like to think that the next generation has it better, So I like to think that my son has it better than I had it. I like to think that I had it better than my mother had it. But in the end, I think that is the thing that I think when you see the variety of ways in which racism plays out within systems and within police violence, that's the thing that really hurts, because each generation deals with the same stuff, just in different iterations and different variations. And so it really is depressing. When I was talking to my son about it, when you have, and I don't know what it's like to have a daughter, but when you have a Black son, it really gets clear about just how fragile life is, and how, because you have to give them the talk, and you have to really question where they go, how they go, who they go with. You have to trust not only them, but you have to trust the people that they're with, whether they're white or Black, because if he's out with a white friend, situations are going to happen to him that are not necessarily going to happen to his white friend. And so I have to trust that his white friends are not going to put him in a situation because of their naivete that will make him vulnerable. So there's just so many different layers to it. But yeah, it's you constantly worry about things that you have no control over, no matter how how hard you work or how well you articulate yourself, mm-hmm. or whatever. It's that shadow that you can't problem solve.
So when you walk out, you're bringing your whole self to every situation, and how much of a bubble wrap do you put yourself in when you're now you are in California? Is it different here? Does it feel?
It's amazingly different here. I think in a couple of different ways. One is going back to my mom. My mom went to every protest movement. I grew up waiting at PTA meetings. She was involved and engaged in everything, and so always felt very comfortable with my voice. Always felt very empowered. I didn't shy away from speaking what I guess I perceived as my truth. So come to California, and I'm also a New Yorker, right? So come to California, I think people tend to be very polite, and people tend to not want to have crucial conversations. They just sort of want things to seem like they're okay, even if they're not okay. And so I have struggled with trying to deal with things and be, I don't want to say confrontational, but confrontational, because confrontations don't bother me in the same way that I see that they bother people in California. Mm-hmm. To deal with things out in the open, and that has not been something I think has been welcomed at times. And I will say that even in a work situation I had a few years back, where with somebody who I would say would be an enlightened person or would probably claim to be an ally, I had one of those Amy Cooper events where, I was accused of being hostile. And all I did, and this is the kicker, I just explained a policy. I didn't have any emotion even connected to it. It was a situation where it came up and the person felt that I was threatening. And I remember thinking, and it was via email, and I wasn't talking to her. I was just explaining what the city's policy was on it, And I remember thinking, if I have to, I remember taking a copy of that because I felt like it was an HR issue. I was like, I'm being accused of being threatening, but I'm not even, I'm not even.
Right. Right. You should see me when I'm threatening.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not seeing it here.
I can count the 9 days that I might have been threatening, and that the 9 moments, and that wasn't one of them that day. So it's things like that, because I felt like if I had, I felt really hurt in that incident, and I felt like if I brought it to people's attention, I would be seen, because I was angry about it, as an angry Black woman. So how can you address being accused of being an angry Black woman when you're actually angry and have a right to be about something like that?
Yeah. And so how do you feel it is when you walk outside now? How old is your son?
My son is 16.
16. So that's a very dangerous, scary age for any parent. I don't care what your ethnicity is, but having Black boy on top of it. How is it? How is it here? I mean, with the protest, did he go to the protests?
He did not go to the protest. I went to one of the protests, and I be honest, I consciously did not invite him to go with me to the protest. I didn't know how it would be. Again, I can't protect. I want to protect my son. I can't protect my son. I have taken him earlier, like I believe when Trayvon Martin, I took him to a protest back then. Like one of the other protests I have taken him to. But this one I did not. And I'm very cautious about it, because I'm cautiously optimistic that things have changed. I do feel a sense of things changing a bit. I think right after the protest, in my own neighborhood, which is a very friendly neighborhood, I felt like white people weren't looking at me in the face as if they were dealing with some shame or guilt or something like that, as opposed to the week before where, it was very friendly and cordial. But I think everybody's dealing with their own stuff and trying to figure out some things. But I still worry about him. I haven't seen enough change yet to not. This is probably the least amount of worry I've ever had, because people are so on alert, and nobody probably is going to do anything in this climate. Mm-hmm. But I'm still.
Well, it's going to take years to go through this. How do you lift the weightiness of hundreds and hundreds of years of oppression? You can't do it with one protest, but this may be the one of the last protests. It may be that we're getting to that place where then we can have these conversations.
One of the things that it will help best is the sort of systemic racism that is sort of underlined in a lot of different things. I think organizations that are older, like museums and like, academic institutions and things like that, will have opportunities to talk about some of the ways in which a lot of racism is perpetuated and oppression is perpetuated and white, privilege is perpetuated. And I think that's probably going to be the most influential change.
Right. For you in the museum setting, it is how many African Americans, Black people have art in the museum? How many women have art in the museum? And then how many Black women have art in the museum? I mean, it is like there is a systemic
definitely
problem.
Yeah.
I mean, when you talk about systemic racism, it has been built to restrict access.
And it has been, and it's hard to, all these years it's been very difficult to talk about these issues when you are one of the first and one of the few, because you don't want to close the doors on people coming up behind you. And that has been really challenging, but it's also, in the last few weeks, I felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders, because you have all these sort of young social justice warriors coming behind us, and that's been really, really heartwarming.
That's really awesome. Well, Stacey, I I want you to be your true self. You need to bring your true self, especially in the world that you're in. And hopefully you will find these ways to have your voice rise up, because people need to hear from you. We need to hear from you, from your perspective, and so do all the people around you. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and I adore you.
Thank you, Tina. I appreciate you doing this. This is going to be a wonderful series. Thank you so much for sharing all of everyone's stories.
You're so welcome. So everyone, that's it. You just got to meet Stacey, this awesome Stacey that I met years ago at the Crocker Museum. And she is one of the smartest women that I know, and entertaining and fun and easy to laugh with. I love that about you. So thank you, Stacey. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Nice to see you.